first things first. I know you're a Brooklyn girl, so I know that much about you so far. But a lot of voters don't know a lot about you. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and also why you just made this decision to run for mayor in 2021.
Yes, well, I am definitely a Brooklyn girl. I lived in Brooklyn all my life. I went to school in Brooklyn. I even went to college in Brooklyn. So I definitely love Brooklyn. I grew up in East New York, grew up in the NYC development, pink houses in East New York. I'm a single mom. I'm a business owner. But I think like a lot of your viewers, Kurt, the reason why I decided to run for office is because I'm tired. I mean, we've been having the same conversations over and over and over again about these issues, and we're not seeing the long-term impact that we need to change the dynamics and change the conversation. And I think that I bring to this campaign a lived experience that will talk about how we will create those long-term changes.
Tell us a little bit about your background as far as what you feel qualifies you for this kind of position, for this kind of leadership role, obviously, as mayor of the largest
Mhm.
city that there is.
Yeah. And you know, one of the things that I want people to think about is this, is that the mayor's office, the city of New York has 300,000 employees, but the mayor's office has a very small team of people that report to them. So it's not just about myself, but it's about the experience that I'm going to bring with my team, the lived experience, the experiences of people who are getting things done every day that are critical and important. You know, we have to see what the position is, see the position for what it is. It really is a leadership position, but it's about surrounding yourself with the right people and making the right decisions. And I think that I have the capability to do both.
I want to get into your positions on a couple of different issues, but real quick before we get into that, your thoughts on the current mayor on the job that he has done, and what would you do differently if elected to this position?
Yeah, I believe that people always try to do the best they can with the information that they have at the time. But I think one of the things that differentiates me is that I'm more proactive than reactive. And that's one of the challenges with our government, period. We're reacting to what's happening as though we can't be proactive about creating the dynamics we want to see. One of the things I say is that, you know, whether you believe in God, spirit, Allah, whoever you believe in, universe, they created heaven and earth. We created homelessness. We created food insecurity. We created a climate crisis and a failing education system. So one of the things we have to stop doing is stop sitting back and pretending as though these things are happening by osmosis. If they're not working, we have to change them. And I think that's the thing that would have been different for me. Even this pandemic, we should have continuity plans that tell us how the city will respond in these type of situations and what we expect from the citizens of the city as well when these type of situations happen.
And let's start there with that pandemic, because obviously that kind of encompasses everything that's going on in the city over the last year. And as we move forward, it's going to be a major factor. As far as the pandemic is concerned, on the healthcare front, making sure everybody is healthy, getting vaccinated, getting outreach to communities that need it. What do you feel needs to be done, and what can be improved as far as from a city aspect, and what would you do differently?
Well, we definitely have to be honest about how much vaccination we actually have, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest challenges right now. I was just looking at something earlier, and they were talking about how in one area in Brooklyn, they've run out of vaccination. But we have to be able to do things in parallel track. We have to be able to, work towards getting the vaccination and coming up with a plan for the rollout of the vaccination as well. So those things are important, and it goes back to what I said earlier related to being proactive as it relates to reactive. On a parallel track, I would have been working with the state and federal government to not just say how much vaccine are we going to have, but working with the city agencies and partnering with different agencies to see who can support us in this rollout, as well as nonprofit organizations, because I know right now I'm having conversations with a number of nonprofits who are open to assisting people with even getting access to sign up for vaccines. So all of those things need to have been put in place prior to our actually obtaining the vaccine. That's how we'll get a different result.
Even before the pandemic, anytime people speak to us or we speak to other politicians, everybody always brings up the same issue. And it's incredible how long this has been an issue, but it's housing, affordable housing, you know, the quality and care of NYCHA facilities, and obviously homelessness here in New York City. All three of those combined to form what a lot of people refer to as a housing crisis. So I'll ask you, is there a housing crisis in New York City? And if so, how do we fix it?
There's definitely a housing crisis. And you know, the sad part about it is we're spending $3.2 billion on homelessness while we see the numbers continue to increase as the people who are homeless in this city. So we right now have a $3.2 billion failure to perform. My mom always said, it's not what you have, it's what you do with what you have. So we want to create affordable housing in this city. We have information, we have data. One thing we always do as government, one thing the government always does is that they do tons of reports. They gather tons of data, but how are we utilizing that information? We're talking about people making $15 an hour, and then we're building $2,000 a month apartments. It just doesn't go. We have to build housing, and the city, state, and federal government must invest in housing based upon what we know people can afford. And when the city is investing in housing, it can't invest and say 25% of the people who are underserved or in poverty are going to get access, because we know more than 25% of the people in the city need that apartment. So based upon the information and the data we have, my goal, my vision is for us to build housing based upon what we know people can afford and build ownership opportunities. You know who becomes most successful is people who actually own something, because that allows you to save money. You have a 30-year mortgage. You're not worrying about your rent going up every year. You're not worrying about if you have to transition and find something that's more affordable. So my goal is to create ownership opportunities for us to invest in housing in a way that produces long-term solutions and results. We can't invest $3.2 billion on homelessness and have people building shanties on Nostrand Avenue.
And you know, you're absolutely right. And you know, you grew up in NYCHA housing. You mentioned it. You know what NYCHA and public housing is all about. I'm sure you've seen some of the conditions in some of the buildings across the city. I know we've done several stories here on News 12 of different things, whether it be, you know, people with cracks in the ceiling or having to do incredible things just to get by and live by. How is this something that even happens in New York City, that we have people living in these kind of conditions when there's this much money that should be made available for them?
Yeah, you know, it happened because if we're being honest, the city, state, and federal government divested from NYCHA residents. And these are residents that live in this city that, much like everybody else, are paying taxes, that are investing in the city. And we took their money and we invested it in other developments that they can't afford. And we just let the walls fall down around them. And now our solution is to put them on Section 8. Right? So now we're going to make them Section 8 recipients. And these are working people. My dad drove a bus when we lived in NYCHA, right? There are many people that work for transit that were friends of his. Another friend worked at an architectural firm. Another friend worked in housing doing maintenance. So these are working people that are contributing to the city every day. And it is deplorable that we don't think that what they want for themselves matters, that we don't have to be proactive about helping them to be able to have better. That's the job of government, and that's what should be happening.
Joycelyn, I want to talk about the education system here in New York City, and because the mayor obviously has to work with the Department of Education, and what we saw with the pandemic raised a lot of issues regarding education here in New York City, especially here in the Bronx with the digital divide, and people not having access to Wi-Fi or access to the equipment they need to learn remotely. What are your overall thoughts, first of all, on the education system here in New York City, and how do we bridge that gap and bring everybody up together at the same time to a level that they should be at?
Yeah, we can't spend $337,000 a year to house one inmate in Rikers, and our kids don't have the technology that they need in school in 2020. We live in a technological world. When my son went to school back in 2008, when he went to high school, he obtained a scholarship because of his grades to a private high school. Back then, they gave him a laptop when he started school. So we're in 2021 now. Every child, when they enter the first grade, should get some type of technology. It's the world that we live in. When they get to middle school, they should get another piece of technology. And when they get to high school, the same should happen. That is my goal. We have to invest the funds that we receive, even if they're limited, in ways that will get us the positive results that we need. If we want kids to be successful, we have to give them the tools and the resources they need to be able to obtain that success. It won't happen on its own. It's going to take the government actually creating it.
We've seen over the last year and over the last years, the issues between the NYPD and the community. And we have seen that there have been efforts on both sides to bridge that gap, but they've not been successful in a lot of cases. A lot of calls this past year to defund the police. First things, are you in favor of defunding the police? Where would you put that money and how would you reform the NYPD?
Yeah, and I want us to stop focusing on the term and actually start thinking about what that actually means. I host town halls every Thursday, and I had the opportunity to bring on some former police officers, and even they agree that there's a lot of waste in the police department, and they have a firm understanding what defunding the police means, actually reallocating funds in a proactive manner to see a different result. So I don't want us to get so caught up on that term, but I think that it's important. We have to invest in communities. We have to empower communities. We don't need to just create programs, but we need to make sure that these programs are actually tied to opportunities. We have to work with our corporate partners, and even on, the city level, we have to work together to know that if we're going to create a program, that program should actually lead to a job opportunity for the youth. And we not only have to address the children that are coming up in this next generation, but we also have to address those from generations past that we failed, right? How do we get them employed? We have to utilize that fund to create employment opportunities and community engagement. And I definitely believe that, we're in this moment, we're in a sink or swim moment. We have to change how we police. Everything has changed in this world, and this is an opportune time for us to take advantage of that and create better.
It's a good point you bring up about defunding the police and the numbers, because I do think a lot of people sometimes think just to take the money away from the police department and that will solve the problem. And that's not the case. You have to obviously put that money into other programs and other things. It's all money towards the same goal, which is public safety. And you want to keep everyone safe. Mm-hmm. To that end, we've seen violence go up across the city over the past year. A lot of gun violence, a lot of shootings, especially in areas of Brooklyn we saw over the summer. Your feeling as far as what should be done as far as curbing violence here in the city, is it even possible? And especially when it comes to gun violence?
Yeah, well, we have to cut off the path to guns getting into the city, right? But one of the things that I say is that, who's not out committing crimes? Someone that has a decent job that's going to allow them the opportunity to be successful and purposeful every day. They're not out committing crimes. So we want crime to go down. We have to invest in how we'll be able to see that happen. But we also have to ask ourselves, we're spending $6 billion on the police department. Are we getting our money's worth? Because we can't spend that kind of money and we're not seeing the results. Where's the return on investment? So if we spend $6 billion on policing and crime is going up and murders are going up and there are more guns in the street, we got to look at what we're doing wrong, because obviously we're doing something wrong. And I think what that is that we're not creating opportunities, we're not building communities, we're not empowering communities. And that's my vision, for us to give some power back to the community so we can create the results that we want to see.
The other issue I wanted to talk about with you is the economy, and obviously getting people not just back to work, but getting some of these businesses back open and running, and getting people money into their pockets. What would you feel like needs to be done to try to spur and help on, especially small businesses here in New York City and minority-owned businesses as well that have been really struck hard during this pandemic?
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, as a small minority business owner myself, I know the challenges that they were experiencing firsthand prior to the pandemic. You know, prior to this happening, I've been having conversations with various elected officials about the things that we can do to create change in the small and minority business community. That means that not just, you know, giving out loans in this moment, but also we spend $22 billion in the procurement of goods and services. It means ensuring that the diversity of the dollars going into that pot matches how those dollars are spent. So if we, you know, there's a ton of opportunity to do work with the city. If we expand the group of firms that the city works with, that one will help a lot of the small businesses that are struggling right now because they'll have the opportunity to do work with the city. But one of the other things I talk about with small businesses is that we have to create a deposit program. Prior to now, when a small business wants to do work with the city, they have to borrow money and wait to get paid. If we want to see them be successful, they have no vested interest in those projects. The city needs to provide a graduated deposit program and give them the money. Because when you're doing that, you're saying that you only want to do business with people whose credit and money that you can use, right? That's discriminatory in my perspective in some natures, right? Because then if I don't have money, I can't do business with the city, and that shouldn't be the case. So we also have to ensure that as, you know, city agencies, that we don't hold up payments for small businesses, because a lot of businesses who have done work for the city and borrowed money are now waiting for payment. So it puts a burden on their business. So there are a ton of things that we could do as it relates to, you know, improving things for small and minority businesses. We have to create opportunities for them. $22 billion is a lot of money. It's a lot of opportunity for small businesses out there.
How much does outreach and care for people as far as mental health is concerned play a role in some of the issues we just spoke about and we have been talking about here? And what can the city do more to address this issue that I don't think a lot of people really pay a lot of attention to here in New York City, the issue of mental health and making sure that it's taken care of and people are taken care of here?
Yeah, well, you know, it plays, to me, it's all connected, right? You know, we have to be honest about the fact that we, through systems and policies and procedures, and I'll go back to this and say it again, there's not a law, policy, or procedure that's been implemented that wasn't done by an ordinary man or woman. So if it's not working, we do have to fix it. But through a lot of those laws, policies, and procedures, we have actually created stress and mental health issues for people. So we have to be honest about that. The role of government should be able to be a support to people. We shouldn't be able to, or we shouldn't be in the business of creating the burden. So, you know, people with mental health issues need support. You can be going through something and, you know, if you end up in a shelter and you don't, you know, you're ending up homeless, you don't think at some point, if you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel, that that's not going to affect you mentally? Your mind doesn't turn off, right? Mm-hmm. So how many policies do we have that attribute to the stress and mental health of the citizens of the city and even of the state and the country? So we have to look at those avenues where we're creating these systems that are causing these stresses, and we have to provide resources for those with mental health challenges. Not just, you know, resources as it relates to therapy, but they need housing, some need education, some need, you know, medication, some need, you know, other types of resources. We have to address the whole person if we want to see a different dynamic as it relates to mental health. And not stigmatize.
Of course, no, absolutely not. I'm going to give you three very quick questions here. There, one of them is a little slightly serious. The other two are a little on the lighter side, but no problem here. First one for you here. When you are eligible, or if you're eligible, when you can get it, will you take the COVID vaccine?
I will probably take the COVID vaccine, but you should know that I have allergies that prevented me from taking chickenpox vaccine and the flu shot. So if it's something that, you know, won't present any health concerns to me, I would be open to considering taking it.
Of course, you got to play it safe, and that's something that obviously people with the allergies have to consider. So that's a good thing for people to remember when they're going and getting the vaccine as well. Do you have a favorite New York City restaurant?
Favorite New York City restaurant? Oh, that's a hard one because I mean, I have a favorite in the area. I like Peaches. I like Seven. I like there's another one on Bedford. So I mean, yeah, they're all my favorites.
You have several favorites. That's okay.
I have several
I
favorites.
have a feeling I'm going to hear that from more than one candidate when I ask that question, so that's not a problem. What is a fun fact about yourself that people may not know?
A fun fact about me, and the thing that's really odd for me even running for office, is that I don't like taking pictures. And I like being on camera. So how ironic is it that I'm doing this? But it's something that I felt the need to do because I mean, we need change. And like Shirley Chisholm says, if something is not working, we can't sit on the sidelines. We have to step up to the plate and, you know, utilize our voice and obtain power to create that change. So that's a fun fact. Yeah.
I mean, if you win and you become mayor, you're going to have a lot of pictures taken of you, and you're going to be on camera a lot. So you might want to, you got to be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, last question for you. And again, thank you so much for a couple of minutes today. I really do appreciate it. But look, we've got a lot of candidates in this field. It is a very packed field. A lot of candidates not only trying to win, but just get on the ballot. I know that's a major issue for you. You're trying to get onto this ballot that we're going to know in just a little while. But what do you want people to remember about you when they cast their vote? What about you do you hope that they think about that stands out, that they'll remember when they have to write one of those, fill in one of those bubbles next to your name, hopefully for mayor?
Well, when people are ready to cast their vote, I want them to think about this. I want them to look at their current lives. I want them to look at what's going on around them. And I want them to think about how they can make this decision that's going to change that dynamic. Can we continue to look at political experience or experience that people have, you know, money that, you know, how has people's political experience and having money impacted your life? And then I want them to look at my lived experience and how it relates to theirs. And I want them to understand that those lived experiences are the things that are going to have me become mayor of this city and have a different perspective, the perspective that they need.